Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
Reed, we're talking with Samantha Skrobot today, and we were in our all hands meeting this morning. We were trying to describe what we talked to Sam about, and we couldn't put our thumb on it. And I think it's because we ended up talking about just a lot of stuff. Like we talked about what she does with GW Advisement, and then we went into just some of the consumerization of apartments, and then we went into like the future of chatbots and hot takes. But I guess I'll just ask, like, what was the, I don't know, biggest surprise or your biggest takeaway from the conversation?
Well, let me just start with my comment that I also made this morning. It is an experience, literally an experience speaking to Sam. I think I compared it to Will Ferrell in Old School after he's up there doing his debate and then he just like blacks out. Because Sam makes you work parts of your brain that you don't normally work. And so, at least for me, they can be a little bit rusty. And then I'm like, just spent afterwards in a good way, though. She's wicked smart, super experienced, has been such a valuable consultant to us. And so huge shout out to her. And she's just brought so much value to the industry. As far as the biggest takeaway, gosh, I think it was just not to cop out, but her overall perspective of kind of how mainly I'll say that the owners and operators are thinking about things now versus, I guess the trends are what she's expecting them to be prioritizing in the future. And not necessarily like contrarian type, stuff. So there's plenty of validation, but just more like kind of, I'll say on some level, like insider, insights about some of these like profound changes happening in the industry. So whether that was related to single family, I thought she did a great job kind of laying that out and giving us context there, or whether it was like as we just talked on another podcast about like the humanless like on-site team or whatever that's being called. What's the best way to put that now? It's not like driverless cars or whatever, but
I don't know.
I don't feel like there's
it was like the online leasing, but that's not true. It's just like
she hit that too.
Or something.
That was great. Yeah, unstaffed, I guess. I feel like there's going to be some name for it. Maybe there already is. But anyways, it's just like all those kind of big, changes that are happening. The flexibility, how amenities are being thought about, ultimately NOI, and then of course like what the marketing's role is within all that. And that's what, again, is so valuable, I guess, powerful about Sam is that she has incredible command on like, asset management and just the ops insights and whatnot, perspective, POV or whatever. But she's every bit as strong like on the marketing front. So, great conversation. There's always a ton of takeaways. You better get out your notepad, if you're listening to the podcast with Sam.
Yeah, I can't wait to have her on again and do a couple more follow-ups. The slight change of topic, but I haven't gotten to ask you yet. You saw the news about Facebook's like market cap drop?
Yeah. Yeah, so was it 20?
Like 23% or something.
Yeah,
they lost
I did.
Like 200 and something billion.
And same day or the day after Amazon had its biggest gain.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, that was the craziness is like between the two. And then I think Netflix also got hit really, really hard. So a lot of the tech companies did, and it's because investors are saying coming out of the pandemic that a lot of the gains that they had are now forecasted to be lost. Like the same,
like it was accelerated, basically.
Right, but they said the big ones, not that Facebook's not, but I think it was Google, Amazon, and there was one other that were like big winners. It's escaping me.
Well,
but yeah.
And Facebook lost, for the first time, they showed a lower daily active user count.
Right.
They lost 1 million daily active users.
Yep.
And then on top of that, which also blew my mind, you and I talked, it may have been a year ago now, but the investment that Facebook was putting into Oculus, where they hired 10,000 engineers, they then posted an annual loss of $10 billion on their on Oculus division, effectively.
Wow.
So I don't know how you spend $10 billion in a year on like a new product. And
you and I could do it.
Brian would probably, he would
vouch for that.
Yeah. And I know people are like, what, how crazy are you investing in this thing? But I wanted to get your take on it. I've got my own take, but one on like the $10 billion investment, but also the daily active user count down, and then the market drop of Facebook.
Well, I mean, people have been predicting wouldn't say the Oculus part, but that their users would eventually plateau. It's almost inevitable, right? But that like the Facebook fatigue, and then funny enough, we just recorded the Gen Z renters, but are they spending as much time? Are they as engaged on Facebook as they are on some of these other social platforms? And the more, I'll say, bad press too. Obviously, they've gotten a ton. Whether it's what they've been hit with legislation, but also just kind of public perception of Facebook, obviously has taken blow after blow. And so, from my perspective, that's just all caught up to them. It's not, you love to say death by 1,000 cuts. Maybe it's not 1,000, but that's the root of this. And then of course, what I just said, that's what's been written about quite a bit is, the effect that pandemic has had. People aren't going to be just sitting there like stuck to their phones as much as they were over the past 2 years as we start to come out of this. So that's my take. I don't have on the Oculus thing that is like shocking, $10 billion. And yeah, where did they lay those bets? And wouldn't want to be the person in the room getting called out for it right now.
So first off on the Oculus, it makes me excited to see what that investment got. So what did you get out of spending 10? And I told you, like, during the pandemic, we got an Oculus, and I was just blown away at how incredible it was. I mean, we use it like once a month or something. It's kind of like a toy almost. But I still want to bring it in so you can give it a go. But to think of you invest another $10 billion, what did you gain out of that? Because you didn't spend $10 billion even like lifetime
hardware,
to date.
yeah.
You didn't spend $10 billion.
Yeah.
Then on the million active, that surprised me. That first of all, that they made it this far and had never seen a down like year.
Yeah, that surprised me too. Yeah.
But that then says that, well, where are those folks going? And I feel like we hear a lot about TikTok. Whenever there were these other social networks that were like picking up, I was like, well, let's see what happens. And then but TikTok has definitely figured it out. Like it's worked out for them. So in a way, I feel like that is counter to the argument that like Facebook has a monopoly and we need to put like some sort of governmental action on them. Because if TikTok is going up and then they're actually declining, it actually bears truth, I guess, to there being a competitor. The question is obviously like if it's a Chinese-owned company, how much do we care now? Do we care even more then? Then on the market cap thing, I'm with you. I think like a lot of that is like a lot of those tech companies went way up during the pandemic, and now they're probably many of them are probably overvalued, and it'll come back down. But shoot, where was I going with the? Well, whatever. I think it's a really smart. If I'm Zuckerberg, I think it's very smart to take a swing like this, because if you look at back before Facebook, originally you might remember Facebook was only desktop and had nothing on mobile. Then smartphone comes out and it wasn't on mobile. And there's this big push like Facebook's dead because mobile's here. And then they adjusted in time and they got on mobile, and it was even bigger for them than desktop. And that's probably how they're viewing, virtual reality is like, shoot, this is the next mobile. Mm-hmm. Or even if it's not the next mobile, Facebook was worth $1 trillion. So are you willing to take like a 1% bet? Like, is it worth, for a risk mitigation standpoint, to risk 1% of your market cap to then say, like, let's take a swing at VR? Mm-hmm. I think that's worth it, a 1% bet. But I think it's really smart for him to go really hard at some other platform, because they missed gaming. Microsoft got there and they didn't, right? So now you have like Microsoft and Sony. They tried to do some gaming with some of the like mobile gaming companies, and those didn't really pan out. But if you're going to take a swing, I think it's smart for them to take a swing. I'm not saying I believe in the metaverse, at least in the next decade, like that people are going to be wearing these headsets all over the place. But even if someone else figures it out, like Microsoft saying that they're going to get into the metaverse, at least you are really planting your flag and say, we're going there. And you, in some way, they would be able to pivot. Even if like Apple comes out with a headset that's more AR based and VR based and whatever, you can take something that you've invested in there, you've made enough noise, got enough publicity that if you start to pivot to what is working, you'll figure it out. But if you just stayed like Instagram and Facebook, I do think that it's kind of like the Yellow Pages, where it's like you were really cool, and now you're just on this really slow death decline, even though you have this massive cash flow.
Yeah. I have no idea what this has to do with Sam Skrobot and that podcast, but
I didn't want to do a whole podcast on that, so I figured let's lead up to Sam's podcast
yeah.
and then go from
I
there.
was about to pay you a compliment, though. I think that's poignant. What you just said, and it not just poignant, but it's true. Nobody will accuse, or at least seemingly, of Facebook not trying to innovate. Not turning into a Polaroid, like of its age or its era. And it also made me think, again, you have me listening to the Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, like Ride of a Lifetime or whatever. And he just talked about that was when they were in the worst shape. Disney was when it wasn't just about innovation, but they just weren't leveraging their assets very smartly. There were so many different paths that they could have taken it, but they just got stagnant. And maybe, there's a variety of reasons. You'd have to listen to the book, but yeah, I just see the parallels with when you get to this size and something like Facebook, like how can they leverage what they have? And this is a great bet to place. It's like whether it turns out to be true or not, it's, I think, hard to deny that VR is going to be new piping, or some of the new piping that the world's going to be working within. And so they're trying to get there first.
Yeah, and
10 billion is still a lot, though.
Yeah, I personally, I more think AR is gonna take off before VR. I know you were in. I think we may have even talked about this before, but you were in the AR like
It's one of my claim to fame. Is
8-9 years ago or
yeah,
something.
when I was at the Statesman, we were, I think, the second paper or third in the country to bring AR, into the newspaper. The first, funny enough, was freaking in like Arkansas or something.
Oh God.
I could not believe it. Must have been where Erasmo, that was the name, and
Yeah.
then they got bought out by HP. But when they were founded, and we actually pitched Lion King. Funny enough, Disney. They came into town. They were like, "Any big ideas?" And I was like, "Have you heard of augmented reality?" And then, of course, it was a huge flop because it was all pixelated. So when people went over the image, they couldn't, the aura didn't trigger.
Yeah. Well, I just say like I think that's going to happen first, whether it be glasses or even AirPods, because AirPods have like really taken. They're on their own. They do $100 billion a year in revenue. So I don't think the Oculus is going to catch up to like the AirPod success anytime soon. But where I'm going with this is like I wouldn't put it past Facebook with that 10 billion. Is like not just VR, but is there some sort of AR component to it? Or it just figures like there's going to be. And so at that point, I could see that being the gateway because I think like it's important to take incremental steps forward, like Apple getting into VR. Like let's say they start with the AirPods. I think AirPods are a version of AR. Then they move into whatever their $4,000 headset, whatever rumored to be. But a lot of people have said that's more AR than VR based. And so the difference is instead of incremental steps, I feel like Facebook is trying, or Meta is trying to go straight for like the home run of like, let's go full VR. And I could see them backing up a little bit and then catching back up with the VR. So anyways, it's just really interesting, but power to, I guess, Zuck for taking the swing and being willing to fight through like, hey, if we got to take a 23% hit, we got to take the hit for the good of the company long term.
Totally.
All right. Well, anyways, as Reed said, not a lot to do with Skrobot, but
Apologies, Sam. I think this is David's fault, not mine.
yeah, for once. Well, we really enjoyed this conversation with Sam. I'm sure we'll have her back on this year. So hope you guys stay tuned and enjoy. Okay, we're here with Samantha Skrobot, or as Reed and I call her, Sam. Which Sam, you signed in as Sam, so Sam's okay.
Sam is totally okay.
Okay, cool. We've known Sam now maybe, I guess Digital's 5, so it must be like 4.5 years. Like right after we started Digital.
Yep, and that was because of Elaine Williams. Dear Elaine, she put us in touch. OpTech, I think that was our first exposure to Sam, and that was in Vegas. We still were, I don't even know if we could call that an office back at that point, but yeah,
no, we had to rent we rented a WeWork space so that Sam didn't think we were losers.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And Sam was with Allison, somebody. What was her last name? She's at LiveCore.
Alison Brown.
Yeah. We had like 2-3 hour like marathon with you guys, and then I think David got like another hour with you after I left because I had to go home for dinner.
Well, anyway, so Sam, we've known you since your days at LiveCore. Now you're a managing partner at GW Advisement, and you've kind of, you've been around advising a lot of folks for the last number of years. So why don't you just give us a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today and what you're up to?
Sure. Well, cut me off if I go too long. It's a lot to cover. So I'm in my 12th year of real estate investment and real estate technology. A majority of that career has been spent working on the investment side, so direct for owners and fund managers, as you mentioned at LiveCore. So with an asset management team where I was running marketing and technology strategy for most of those groups, either helping prove out ROI on tech investments and strategies that the portfolios were making, and then the same for marketing and leasing strategies. In my time, both at my very first job in New York City, where I worked for a fund, and most recently at LiveCore with Blackstone, got exposure to the PropTech investment side as well, because those investors were active in the PropTech space, which made me a lot of friends because I was sitting on the money side in the tech space. So that combined with my strategic efforts as part of my job got me really invested in PropTech and real estate technology. So when I left LiveCore, I was really determined to be able to hold that vantage position where I got to see what owners and investors and decision makers in that space were doing, but also get really involved in prop tech. And I've been blessed to be able to maintain that position by servicing fund managers, asset managers with their strategies, but also working with prop tech on business development strategy, product strategy, and all that fun stuff. So recently I've taken a full-time position with RentPath as their partner, as their director of integrations and partnership. But I do still continue to coach actively for marketing managers and fund managers who want some marketing assistance and tech assistance.
Yeah, that's great. And Digible most recently had you for, would you do a 3-part series on,
Yeah.
well, do you have a title for that series?
I think we were focused on integrations. I think that was it. I think it was just integrations and software training.
Yeah, because Reed and I have said forever, but it's like if anybody ever wants to, somebody that understands the full stack, but as it relates to marketing, then Sam's the one to go to. And at Digital, we, as we often like to think of ourselves as students of the industry, but we just didn't know anyone who would be better at walking us through the intricacies of the entire ecosystem. I thought you had great slides, and you pulled some. I think it opened a lot of folks' eyes to how messy the ecosystem is, particularly on our tech side. Like our tech teams will be like, oh, well, whatever integration. But when you see it all laid out in the mind map like you did, then you're like, okay, this is disaster.
Yeah.
Um, so cool that you started to move over, I guess, to the prop tech space, because I think I still think of how much work you could get just by advising management companies. So is there a particular reason why you've sort of changed your tact and focused more on there? Is it just where the wind blows?
No, I've been grateful enough to not have, or blessed enough to not have to do too much marketing on my consulting services. So I've kind of just gone where I've been asked to support. And sometimes that means being a little stressed out that I'm not going to eat that month. But most of the time is I'm more stressed out on when I'm going to sleep because there's so much work to do. And so I've been really happy that the business has been pretty evenly split for supporting fund managers and asset managers as well as prop tech companies because that's how I like it.
Cool. All right.
Maybe a good jumping off point, since you talked about the integration series that you did with Digital, but is to talk about what the landscape looks like now. You mentioned, all the prop tech, we're all experiencing it, seeing it, and it's an exciting time, I think, for the industry, but also kind of unnerving. Just all that's happening and sorting through that and figuring out how to be able to streamline, incubate, test and learn, all those cliches. But as it relates to integrations, can you give us a little color just at a high level, like what I guess excites you, what the landscape looks like right now, and what are the biggest pain points? Are they the same that they have been for the last few years, or are things starting to change there? And do you have any optimism, I guess, about integrations as you look ahead at the next 3 to 5 years?
I'm incredibly excited at the majority of middle players. So like let's remove the big PMS, property management system providers and some of the larger CRM or LMS providers and talk about that mid group. And even the ILSs, I think, are in a really energized position to get smarter about sharing data, about sharing information, whether that's visual media or integrating with resident engagement tools like automated tools or tools that just support renters in their journey. And I think that is really inspiring to see. And I think we're going to see a lot of consolidation and a lot of mergers and acquisitions in that space continue as a result of it. On the other end of that, I think we're going to see a slowdown on the amount of data that gets shared from property management systems to everybody else. And I understand it because there's a lot of data security concerns. However, I think what's really interesting is that never have fund managers been pitching harder that their acquisition and operational investment strategies are rooted in data. And where they're getting that data is critical. And so you've got this sort of like demand from the top of the market where all the money is hunting more and more data and wanting to understand it better. But this middleman in property management systems really limiting access to that data that helps validate for small prop tech companies, large enterprise prop tech companies, and even the PMCs themselves. So I think in terms of data share to drive investment and operational action, we have a lot of room to grow in that space. And I hope we see some changes there. But I'm a little worried about that, to be honest. But very excited about visual media, really excited about unit level content and resident engagement solutions, which are just all over the market right now.
What I don't know if you were going to push her on this, but what would be your prediction, at least for that data? Let's start with the data share side of things, because as you mentioned, you've been in this industry longer than Reed and I have. But do you see that improving, or do you actually see it getting worse over, let's say, 5 years, 10 years, or at what point would you say it finally everyone starts working together?
She's in deep thought.
At one point, everyone starts working together. Well, I don't know that I would. I don't know that we've got utopia anywhere in our short term destination. Um, the it's interesting because the pressure from investment managers and acquisition groups, fund managers, to get access to data also means wanting to be really protective of that data. And I think property management systems, I think it's just really understanding where all your data and where the value of data comes from. I think for, like I said, for mid-sized companies or companies that aren't providing specific software, major software services to property management companies, I think you'll see a better appreciation, I hope, for the data that exists within those systems and a really aggressive push to get the data out of those systems and into intelligent BI software solutions. Unfortunately, that's going to be driven just by the guys that have the money to finance it right now, unless there's a great BI tool out there. I haven't seen one since Rentlytics that's going to help really allow people to migrate that data together and drive actionable insights from it. In terms of the property management systems, I think the biggest concern is these mid-sized players want to help validate their attribution and their credit and what they're running to a property so that they can understand and optimize ROI. And I think, unfortunately, the property management system companies are aware that that comes at a cost and they're already billing for it. And they're going to be more protective about sharing that information back, both from pressure of their investment clients, which I think is what's driving a lot of it, but also their own security. And I don't see what the solution is there yet. I hope it like bonks me on the head one day and I get to be the one to build it or tell someone to build it. But I don't know what the answer there is yet.
Yeah, I'll toss it back to Reed here in a second, but Entrada has been open for as long as I can remember with their stuff, and so I would have figured that that would have
Yeah.
caused more company like put pressure on other companies because I thought clients would demand it to say like, well, Entrada's open, so now Yardi or Real Page need to be open, but that doesn't seem to have worked. And then Reed, I think about you and I both read Seven Powers by Hamilton Himmler, Himmler, Helmer, whatever,
I
Seven
don't know.
Powers.
Yeah.
But one of his seven powers is switch costs. And so I actually wonder if it's helped Entrada or hurt Entrada because in one way you would say, oh, they're flying the flag for openness. And so let's hopefully that would be great marketing and more people would move over there because it's easy for them to export their data or bring it into different BI tools or whatever, different vendors work with them. But on the other hand, the switch cost from like a Yardi or a Real Page is enormous. And so it's a terrific power for them. And so I'm just saying like, so for at least 5 years, Entrada has been open, and yet it doesn't seem like it's really helped. Unless Sam, you've seen it a different way. Has it been a positive that Entrada's open, or has it put any pressure on the other groups?
I don't know that Entrada has done a great job. And, Yardi has some API feeds that I think are really beneficial. I don't think either do a great job of helping clients realize the value that they've put into allowing those feeds to exist. And I don't think that the client or the vendor partners that are tapped into those integrations are doing a great job of expressing that either. It's more like a chore. Like, can we get this done so that I can give you better reporting? And I don't think anyone's really demonstrating the value of it. But I would say more than any other time in the market, if I were Yardi or RealPage or MRI, I would be nervous about switch cost shifting. And I think that's been demonstrated by the CRM and LMS space really being taken over that marketplace. And people are like, they're done. If the tech's not working, they'll move out. Now, is it a more difficult decision for an investment company and an owner to do that? Sure. But they have never been more hungry for access to their own data and to get operational and strategic insights out of it. That if those guys aren't at least catering to their investment clients from a data perspective, switch cost becomes less and less of a concern. So I would be worried if I were those groups, although I'm not entirely sure who's out there to get them. It could be
Well, that's
missing.
a great segue because that was the question I wanted to ask is who are you excited about? Like, is there room for another Yardi or a Real Page, Entrada MRI? I well, I don't want to lead you. So there's secondary kind of tertiary PMSs. I didn't know if any of them are really exciting you right now about what they're doing and kind of what their future might hold, or is there a possibility that somebody new, does enter the market that is way more, I'll say, investor friendly when it comes to like data access and leverage?
Um, I think if we're going to see a path to expansion into the property management system space, it's going to be by the way Entrada's already demonstrated that access, which is entering through CRM and LMS first. And I think there are absolutely providers in that space that are specialized in CRM and LMS services who have the ability to expand into the property management system space and take over. And I think who I'm most excited about is probably Funnel by Nestio. I've known that group I actually knew them when they were Nestio. I've known them for a very long time. I'm a huge advocate of Ben Rubin over there who leads product. And I think that they're approaching how they organize data the right way. I think um, they're hunting the right talent. They've put the right talent in place. They put Ben Stewart over there recently, and they just keep hiring really great, really smart people, and they keep building smart tech. And I'd keep the same eye out for groups like Rent Dynamics and Knock too. I think there's really a lot of opportunity for those groups to creep their way down funnel. Although I'm not sure, some of them seem to be focused up funnel, and I don't know what their long-term path is. But that's who I'd be looking out for.
Reed, I don't know if you noticed that she took a dig at you.
Okay.
She said that Ben Stewart was the right guy to bring over for Funnel. They did not hire you away from Digible to go lead Funnel. So
Isn't that a
just I
dig at
wanted to
you as
point that.
well?
No,
Why
no,
is this
no, no,
just about me?
no. No, just you.
Well, tell us more about Funnel then, since you're really excited about them, because I know David is too, and he's gotten a chance to know both Bens. And we have, I think, similar optimism, but for people that don't know as much about Funnel, what's most exciting about kind of their roadmap? And certainly we get it with smart people, good people, but what about the tech stack or things that they're doing have you most jazzed?
Well, they've been dedicated in this space a lot longer than it may seem for a lot of people. So they started as Nestio, which was a syndication service exclusively, or I don't know if it was exclusively, but primarily offered in New York City and the Northeast. And so their tech has been in real estate, and like it's hard to come out of New York, and it's also hard to enter New York with PropTech because it is totally a completely different beast. But I think that they mastered and really understood the nuance of individual owner needs there. And New York has such a great segment of real estate ownership representation from like large funds and REITs to the small individual private landlords. And they were able to offer a service that mastered across the board for them in terms of syndication. And in syndication, you are just all about that data. And I think their curiosity and excitement in that space, and then their ability to jump out of that market into the national landscape, demonstrated that their tech was transferable and has a high amount of value. I think Ben Rubin is just a great product mind over there who's really smart about UX, but also incredibly particular about data and how they can drive data to build a better product every day. So there's just no stagnancy I see over there. they're constantly evolving. And I wouldn't expect with someone like Ben at the helm for that to slow down anytime soon. But I don't work there, to be fair. They're not paying me or anything. I'm just a fan.
Anything to add, David?
No, well, I mean, I'm a fan of Ben Rubin too. I know him better than Stuart. So, anyways, I love my conversations with Ben. They seem super willing to work together with other folks. So they don't. A lot of, I mean, we've talked about it, but focus is so important. And so you could see them like I feel like Knock went that way a couple of years ago, where Knock seemed more willing to like sort of veer and partner up with other folks. And at some point, Knock was like, everybody shut up, shut up. We got to just focus on our vision, and that's where we're going to spend our time. And Funnel hasn't done that, even though they've really accelerated the pace at what they're working. They still seem to have just become like remained open to work with everybody. So I love the direction they're going.
So another question, shifting a little bit to, I guess, on-site management, but more and more companies are exploring kind of like driverless cars, right? Humanless property management. At least, we're hearing a lot more about that. I'm sure you are too. But UDR, I think, don't they have like 20 properties now that they claim don't have a single person on site? And I didn't know if you're expecting that trend as you talk about the REITs, like to start to pick up steam pretty quickly, or if you think we're still far away from, kind of a broader adoption of, heavy automation for, on-site management.
No, I don't think we're far away. I think we are at its front door. It is happening now, and it is only going to continue to grow. It's going to be imperative that we as an industry do this thoughtfully, cautiously, and intent with great intention, because this is, it's so easy for this industry to look at like prop tech to prop tech as competitor, or PMC to PMC, or REIT to REIT as competitors. But the impression that we leave renters with on how automation is going to be handled in this space is so critical and affects all of us. And so paying attention to those companies that are touting going full automation is really, really critical in how we all decide we're going to move forward and continue to engage with renters. I think this industry has a habit of allowing prop tech to enter the space to the under the veil of it being to the betterment of the renter. Like, this is to improve a renter's experience. This is to improve their lives, but quickly shifts, as anything does in a business model where the revenue is sitting on one side to cater to what the property management companies want. And so something that might start with let's improve the lives of renters can quickly pivot to let's reduce our operational cost. And I think we have to be really cautious about how we balance that. And I'm a little bit worried in the resident engagement space, is what I like to call it. All the tools that are offering either automated or guided or natural language or just new ways for renters to engage. Running that balance between what the renter wants and what the PMCs are demanding, I think is interesting. And I put the heat back on property management companies to really own the reins again of like, how do you want to engage with your renters? What impression do you want to leave with them? If it's an automated experience that's wonderful and seamless and they enjoy it, great. But I hope you're measuring that. I hope we all are. And I hope we're paying close attention to it, because the renters deserve a good experience.
Totally. Well, I think that measurement is one of the hardest things, right? It's not an NPS score. I'm not saying you shouldn't be doing that, but I think it all now brings us back to data. But what do the KPIs look like? To effectively understand whether you're using too much automation, not enough, et cetera. And I brought this up. I think even used a good example like Everett from Amenify. We talked to him, and obviously his whole model is predicated, I think, on that consumerization and like trying to create a better experience, bringing amenities to the property. But when I pushed him, and I'm not saying because he has great answers, I could listen to Everett for 3 hours straight. But what do those KPIs look like? It was a little squishy. It wasn't, I think, super cut and dry. And it's a big ask. He's coming in, right, to try and get those asset managers, fund managers on board. And, he's definitely built up some scale, but he's one of many. I don't mean within that specific genre, but there's a lot of now these new techs that are trying to create, their minds, and I think rightfully so, like a better experience. But altogether, that again is a lot, right? For the on-site team and for asset managers to try and absorb and figure out how do we effectively test this, so that we can isolate, on some level, like that particular service or enhancement or automation, and kind of, be able to block out some of the other noise so that we really know whether this is an effective, feature, I guess, or addition, to our portfolio. I think we see that with, I'll just say, MarTech advertising. There is so much noise to try to normalize the picture is extremely difficult. And I feel like that has a lot of parallel to what we're seeing with, on-site automation.
Yeah, I agree.
I was actually just complaining about that this weekend with Nicole. I feel it's the same way with even health stuff. People are like, don't. So, for example, like, don't eat any product that has an ingredient in it that you can't pronounce. And then it's like, well, what about Beyond Meat or one of these that it's like, I can't pronounce any of the stuff on that package, but yet they're saying it's better for you because it's all made of plants. And so I was like, no matter what view you take these days, you can find a view from somebody that's contradictory. And so I'm just saying more of like how much noise there is. There's so much noise when it comes to health and fitness. And I heard a crazy stat, but apparently since the year 1900, there have been 74,000 diets that have like hit the market. It's like 74,000 diets. So no wonder everyone's confused about like, so can I eat an apple or not? Good or bad, right? So anyways, I just feel like it's we don't have it as bad as I guess the dietitians or health industry have it, but we do have it. Feels like it's hitting us hard.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd love for you to share a little more about RentPath. Obviously, big acquisition happened there. I don't know if it was a year or 2 years ago, Redfin, but culturally, I guess, and you don't have perspective. I know you didn't work there before, but just really, Dave and I were both excited actually to see that. We've talked to a lot of different people, and throughout the ILS, I'll say community or network. And one of the questions we always ask is, what makes you guys different? It's not an easy, I guess, space to reinvent yourself. But there's so much opportunity because of the data, because of the scale, because of the relationships, because of the brand. So there's a lot to build off of. But what is the future look like for any of these folks? Like, so best to ask you about RentPath, but anything else you want to comment on as far as kind of the ILS climate right now, what you're expecting over the next few years from both the big guys, including RentPath, obviously CoStar, and then maybe some of those secondary, tertiary players.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly exciting space to be focused in on. I'll start with RentPath. The Redfin acquisition is just really energizing. Bringing those two marketplaces together is going to be really insightful and exciting. I have a high appreciation for how Redfin cares about their users. And I'm really excited to see that translate, as if you can't hear from the way I've been talking so far about how that translates to the representation of renters. I feel renters are really underrepresented in the ILS space. I think Apartment List entered the market. So did Zumper, really energized about it. And then they fell a little bit, I don't want to say victim, but they had to pivot to the property management companies and the ownership groups. And so I think a lot of what those needs were drove product decisions. And I think it came at the cost of what the renters experience on platform looks like. And at RentPath, they've got really exciting leadership in place. John Ziegler, Sean Barry are really excited to come in. And I think use this opportunity. The way that they describe it is we're the most well-funded startup with no debt. And that's a great place to be in. And I think the people who've been at RentPath for a historically long time who are still there speaks well to the RentPath reputation, but also gives credibility to the fact that this company has been through, I mean, this is one of the longest tenured companies in the space, and they started off in print and they've pivoted to .com. They can pivot again, and I'm so excited to be part of that ride. And I think all of the ILSs have a lot of pressure on them right now to figure out who do we cater to and how do we manage the duality of representing renters and servicing property management companies, or the inverse of that, however you look at it. So it'll be exciting to see what direction all of these groups go in. I'm really excited to see what Zumper does as well. I have a lot of friends over there, and I think they're working on exciting stuff, specifically in the SFR space as well.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, but I'm going to table that for just 1 minute and ask you a
Mhm.
little bit more about RentPath, Redfin, and ILS like future. What do you anticipate some of the biggest changes being for the ILS? Yeah, again, ILS climate, I guess. Um, and is any of that already available, or can we hear a little bit more about that with like Redfin? sorry, RentPath.
Nike and
But
RentPath.
I'll just tee this up a little bit more, but they were starting to, I don't want to say encroach, but starting to look at like digital services. Um, and I guess there's some other products, maybe David could speak to it better than me, that don't sit within one or the other, but just kind of standard lead gen versus digital service type offerings. But yeah, what should we expect from RentPath? Can't get this out, Sam.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I
but
know what
yeah,
you're
I'm just
saying.
looking for like big changes, or they're
Yeah.
not. It's just going to be subtle stuff, like, and it's going to be mainly like just the user experience and getting better about,
I would
cable.
not expect anything about RentPath to be subtle over the next couple years. I think everything is going to be big and loud and exciting. They do have a very large product suite that I was not familiar with before my interviews or even really my first day there. And I've been pretty amazed to see all the different stuff that they have working over there. I think you're going to see first them getting a better understanding in the marketplace, the reception to those services, some of which are really strong already today. And so they'll continue to expand on those additional services that they offer. But I think most importantly and most excitingly, they're really trying to figure out how to build an ecosystem that makes sense between all the product offerings that they have, where they may need to expand into new sectors outside of advertising. But I would not suspect a suppression of them on any of their diverse product offering sets and a centralized focus to advertising. I think instead what you're going to see is a real core offering of an ecosystem that hopefully solves the solution of bridging that better relationship between renters and property management companies and landlords. So their call center services, SEM, social, I think you'll see those embedded and intertwined a lot more sophisticatedly. Is that a word? More sophisticated? With
It
more
is here.
sophistication? Sure.
It is
Yeah,
here.
with more sophistication.
We have a lot of those words on the Digible Dudes.
Yeah, I like how every interview we do with a new employee, you say, we made up a word called manifestus. Have you seen it on our website? It's like, they probably didn't. Well, I don't want to be unfair, but it's like, do they know what manifesto is anyways? Or
Yeah,
they
all right.
believe you with
Yeah,
manifestus?
you need to know that first.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I bet that this is just a side bet, but I bet RentPath has more SKUs than Redfin, meaning like to a Salesforce, because of what you said, Sam, where they've had to pivot a couple different times. They had this Salesforce that really had to go and sell the either asset manager or on-site team or whatever, the PMCs. That's who they were catering to. And my impression of all the interviews I've heard with the founder of Redfin is like it's been way more like consumer focused from the get-go. So I'm just saying I bet there's way more SKUs on the RentPath side than there's the Redfin side. And it also has me wondering when she says they'll be loud. Uh, are they going to gut some of that and like totally like change paradigm, or will they, is it going to be kind of like a slow march? Because it's like when Steve Jobs had left Apple and came back, when he came back they had, I forget how many SKUs it was, but he was like, we're cutting them all and we're doing 3, right? And that was like one of the things that turnaround folks have credited to why he was able to pull Apple out of it, because he's like, it just makes the supply chain easier, it's easier on the salespeople, it just really simplifies the process and you can stay focused. So anyways, I know you probably can't comment on any of that, Sam, but it just struck me when you guys were talking.
I think
Yeah,
they should
no.
hire Laura Dern.
Mm.
Isn't that Goldblum's ex?
From
As their spokesperson.
Is she actually like in real
Are
life
they
ex from like
Are they
Jurassic
still
Park?
together, or is it a Kurt Russell,
like did they
Goldie
I
Hawn?
had no idea that Laura Dern dated. Wasn't she engaged to Billy Bob Thornton at some point?
I'm sure a few people have been.
Yeah, a couple qualified.
I don't know.
But
I didn't know.
I thought they were dating at one point. I hope I have that right.
I just know he was like in his character in Jurassic Park was really into Laura Dern, but she was like, I'm
For
with
sure.
the paleontologist.
That's why I brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as going big, that's one of the things that few other ILSs have done. And I know it takes a war chest, but obviously apartments.com has been super active in just their marketing and their branding. And they've hung their hat on Goldblum, but I don't see, Apartment Guide, I don't see Zumper or anybody else. And maybe I'm not looking the right spots, but it doesn't feel like they do much consumer marketing, which you can build great products, but if you don't invite them to dinner, how do they know to come? So I'd love to see somebody get a little bit more aggressive there, so it's not like kind of a one horse race. At least it still feels that way to me.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. We'll have to have somebody on too from from maybe that's been with RentPath for some time and see if we can pick their brain specifically about the ILS landscape, like we did with Zumper, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned SFR, so that's been a very active conversation here at Digible with several people, like our clients, but some of the other folks in our network. Certainly, a lot of the technology companies now are trying to make sure that they stay in front of that. So, again, we'll start just high level, but talk to us about what you're seeing with SFR and how much connectivity it has with the multifamily, like I guess, stakeholders or key players. Like, I don't want to say any more than that, Sam. So just talk to me about SFR.
Okay. Well, so obviously has been growing, continues to grow, real acceleration over the last couple years. What we're really looking at is a heavy focus on institutional presence in that market, and a lot of consolidation of assets under one umbrella. I think from a prop tech perspective, it's an interesting space that I feel, ironically enough, has been serviced by like all of the prop tech that has entered the SFR space to date, or let's say that the last like 5 to 7 years, has really been catered to the individual small landlord who's maybe got like one guy or like a small family fund who's running like 20 assets in Kentucky or something, right? And a lot of the prop tech for SFR has been serviced to that space, while all the institutional presence has been a build it on our own. We can't make this little program that works for 20 properties work for us, and we can't steal from MFRE because we've tried and that just square peg round hole isn't fitting. And so they've been building a lot of their own technology in that space. I think what's going to be interesting to observe over the next couple years is how well that technology is able to sustain and hold itself up, because that's a continued investment. I don't have to tell you, into maintaining and curating your technology. Or are we going to see larger migration of that prop tech SFR space move to service institutional, or how that's going to play out? But I think it's been interesting to observe how much has been built on your own. It's almost like every institutional property management company in SFR has been taking the build it your own path. And that is just not sustainable, in my opinion. So maybe one guy's going to resell something that they've got cooking and they've been working on, and that'll be how the market solves that issue. But somebody's going to have to come along and solve it soon.
Well, I was going to ask, sort of related to SFR, but a number of years ago, maybe a couple at this point, Reed and I started to get a lot of folks talking to us about international expansion and how the U.S. is kind of like seen as like the top of the food chain when it comes to like multifamily in the way it's run today with these large
Mhm.
institutional investors and properties, versus other parts around the world are kind of like more similar to New York City, where you might have someone that owns a unit and might rent it out. So we know that Greystar's made big moves into Asia, and I think they have an office in Mexico now, the UK, Europe. So just comparing the two, Sam, do you think SFR is, we're going to hear a lot about that right now, and then it's going to go quiet for a while, similar to what international expansion did? Or do you think SFR is going to like take hold faster than what we saw with international? And then I'm curious if you have any comments on the international stuff and why we're just not hearing as much about it these days. It seems like it was not a flash in the pan, but it just seems like we heard a lot and then it went quiet. And I know it's still happening, but that's all I got.
Yeah, as it relates to technology specifically.
I guess more how it will impact, let's say, us and our listeners day to day. So folks that are in multifamily, vendors and just operations folks in multifamily in the states, are we going to feel more from SFR than we're feeling from impacts of any expansion internationally? And then, why has it felt like international has kind of gone quiet?
It's called the
I can't
pandemic.
I can't yeah, that'll do it. I can't totally speak to the splash boom bang over in international. I would say that from my perspective, the activity's still been really high and the migration has still been significant in terms of groups expanding internationally to offer those services. And I don't see a slowdown in that space. I don't know if maybe it's just not grabbing the same kind of headlines or it's COVID, but I haven't seen a slowdown there at all. I think you'll see that continue. SFR is the new beast that we all need to be paying attention to as it relates to competitive landscape for MFRE, but also how it impacts the lives of renters and how it impacts the housing market as a whole. So, yeah, I think both of them. I think SFR in the States is probably the most important one for us to be aware and highly attuned to in representation of renters and of the entire rental experience.
Yeah, I would have said the same thing had you asked me the question, because I think internationally,
Okay.
I think some of it's COVID. I've seen big funds be raised, but I haven't had like um, prospective customers from like the Ukraine like calling us and saying, "Hey, can you help us?" But I think that's more of like a factor of the market. Like, so that it's more of like they need a homegrown solution to fit with their culture and processes and stuff. Not saying that there won't be some retooling for some of the software that's here, but I think it actually adds for more possible innovation because whatever, Eastern Europe is different than the States. And so they're going to do things differently and they'll probably want their own solution.
Well, they might not be calling you, but I would tell you if you're calling them, you're going to get a lot of positive response, has been my personal experience working prop tech internationally. Is that they just don't know what's available to them. They're new, like you mentioned. It's a new, or it's not new. It's a different identity of ownership over there, and the style, especially in Europe, is just completely different than it is here in terms of like, oh, well, we'll just take what we get, and it's a little laissez-faire, and they just don't approach trying to bring tech in as aggressively as we did here. I don't think they just get the sex appeal of it as much as we do. But once it's in front of them, they're actively engaging with tech that works well here and expanding that in the EU. And I think we'll see that continue as investors move over there as well, and then demand the same type of services, technology, and data on their investments in that space as they do here.
Got it. Well, Reed, when we start calling, you know, the Eastern Bloc, I think we should not use our accents, our fake accents. That is, I think that would be ill-advised. All right. Well, single family rentals, for, I don't know, Reed and I've been paying attention the last 4 years on deliveries of units for multifamily. So do you actually think, and you may have data on this that I haven't seen, Sam, but do you actually think that we will see faster delivery of units than what we've been seeing with properties? Because with a property, it may be like 5 years soup to nuts or 3 years soup to nuts. I mean, it takes a while to deliver units. And so when things like COVID happen and the industry gets behind, and the U.S. as a whole is in a housing crisis where there's not enough units to deliver, is single family rentals actually one way that we can quickly catch up to the number of units that are needed? So is it just a faster? Do you know? Is it a faster delivery process, and will it help us at all?
Um, I'm not super familiar with SFR like new build and development. I haven't worked in that space, but surely the acquisition of that existing real estate allows us to service units a lot faster, and I think that's gonna continue. It obviously has an impact on the residential side of the market, which is incredibly important for us to pay attention to. But I'll be completely honest, after my time working at LiveCorp Blackstone, I have learned to keep my political opinions to myself because they weren't totally allowed there. And I've got a lot of personal opinions on what the impact of SFR can do to renters and to the residential housing space that I think we all just need to be socially and politically conscious of. But I'll leave it there.
Well, anything else on SFR?
Who do you see as kind of is there a front runner, anybody out there right now that you think is um kind of got a head start, whether it's the management companies themselves or whether it's the technology companies, the ILSs, uh, or is it just wide open space and there are no real front runners in any of those categories?
There's front runners that have been there for a while, right? So, Invitation Homes, Progress Residential, I believe that's their name. I'll plug one of my existing partnered clients right now, National Home Rentals in Chicago. These are all groups that have built their own tech and really focused on servicing and scaling these services across the country quickly. And so I'd pay attention to all those big leaders, specifically what they're doing to service residents and what they're building in terms of technology.
Cool.
Well, I want to back up for just a second. We're gonna probably uh, get your hot takes here in a minute, Sam. But for you mentioned Rentlytics early on in the conversation. I'm curious back to that whole where folks aren't super open with their data, or they many of these large platforms try to keep it contained. Do you think anybody could build a Rentlytics style platform today, or would it be more challenging to build today versus what it was when Rentlytics was around? I'm just wondering if so for example, like Rentlytics got acquired, I think it was by RealPage, and I wonder how that may have changed the landscape, where folks, not people that want to build the Rentlytics, but of the big players, they maybe at this point they'd say like, well, I wouldn't want to help a new player because it's just going to get bought by my competitor or whatever. So, do you think it would be harder to build a Rentlytics today?
No, no, I don't think it would be harder to build one. I think Rentlytics and I think the property management companies or property management system companies have done a good job of trying to enhance their BI. But in that space, that sector, that group, Entrata, RealPage, Yardi, MRI, I think they build it good enough and then they call it done. And there is a hunger. Like I said, it's fiercer than I have ever seen. I mean, investment managers are raising capital based off we have the smartest tech to run smart acquisitions and to run the smartest investment strategy. And they have to back that up with real data. And so the extraction of that data and cleaning of it and organizing of it is really carried by those investment and fund managers today. And I think servicing that space is critical, and I think probably easy to do. I hope whoever does realizes the value of groups like yourselves, website providers, ILS vendors, media providers that are just sitting on stacks and stacks of incredibly insightful top funnel market data on how renters are really reacting to product and price. And once somebody figures that value out, I think that'll really shift the marketplace. But the demand is high, and I think we'll see that shift. Hopefully, I hope it doesn't stay isolated with everybody building their own BI tool. I hope somebody comes into the market and pushes something more accessible. I was a big fan of Rentlytics when it was around, but it did not get anywhere near where it could have gotten.
Cool. Well, my last one before we might turn it over to you, unless Reed has something else, is folks that have been in the industry for a while, like maybe even yourself, would say that they've seen different waves of disruption come in.
Mhm.
And so, just curious, is there any disruption that you expect to happen in the next 5 years, like something big? And is it curious, obviously, what it is, if you have a prediction there? And what do you think it would come from it within or from someone outside? Because I'd say like you have all these venture capital funds raising enormous amounts of cash, and now they're starting to say like, oh shoot, maybe we should do some prop tech investment or real estate tech investment. And so you have these outsiders that are starting to come in, like even oh shoot, Meet Elise was from outside. So anyways, any predictions as far as like disruption that's that's going to be hitting the industry over the next 5 years, and is it more likely from outside or from within?
I think the most disruptive tech we're going to see, we've already talked about, and it is Meet-Elise. It's what I consider resonant engagement tooling. It's here. It's going to continue to grow. It'll be built by outsiders and by people who are already here. And we're not going to see a slowdown there. And I want to really emphasize that it is disruptive technology for all that is good with that and all that is bad. And so we'll have a lot of growing pains and a lot of realization to do around that kind of technology. I think what our marketplace in its entirety is really missing is renter representation. And if someone can figure out a way to monetize or to build a monetization model off renters, that is really going to be what disrupts this space. Because as long as we continue to cater and tie our investments in prop tech to the investments and owners of real estate, we're going to get a lot of the same stuff. And we've seen advancements, but something that's truly going to come in and shake up this market is going to be built off monetization from the renter, not from the landlord. And I haven't seen that yet.
Just to clarify, do you mean where you can eke some more revenue out of the renter?
No, that there's plenty of investment space into already. Helping landlords figure out how to get more out of a renter has plenty of focus already. I'm talking about building technology solutions that really help give renters a voice in this marketplace, but tie their monetization to the actual renter, right? So gaining their revenue from the renter, not the landlord.
Okay. Do you have any ideas there?
Well, I don't know if this is my hot take, but I brought this up when we talked to Meet Elise is, when are these widgets and automated leasing agents, when are they going to start looking at the whole market, not just that property? Because to me,
Heard
that's
you
one of
ask
the,
that. I
yeah,
love
it's one
that
of the,
question.
oh, good. Well, that leads me to, when is Amazon or Google going to get into the housing industry? And I think it's naive to think, at least with Amazon, that they wouldn't, look at that. And is antitrust, keeping them from doing that? I don't know. Because obviously there's a lot of heat on them right now, but it hasn't kept them from getting into other big industries, especially Amazon with healthcare, obviously, groceries, etc. And think of the experience that they could provide as you keep bringing it back to that, Sam, that resident experience. And
Mhm.
David often criticizes, their e-commerce platform, but I think obviously nobody's got more data and is further ahead than they are when it comes to voice recognition, those kinds of automated interactions that are still in the very early stages in multifamily. So, and with Google, everybody keeps saying, when is it ever going to happen that they're going to displace the ILSs the way they did, in travel? So I feel like at some point, one of those two is going to get into the housing industry. It's just a matter of in what form.
I used to carry that opinion pretty adamantly, but I have seen Google step in, take a look around, go, screw that. That is a messy pile. I do not want to deal with it, and then step out. And I've seen them do it 2 or 3 times. And I think that we're old, we're antiquated, we're messy. It's going to take a big lift. It's not an easy walk in. So if they do it, it's going to be through acquisition. I have been interested to see that they haven't focused on an acquisition strategy to get them entry into the market for sure. And I think as soon as that happens, if that happens, that's definitely a game changer for all of us for sure.
Yeah, I
I
would
don't
bet
think
more on
antitrust is going to stop them at all, though. That's not the habit of either of those organizations.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I would bet more on Amazon. I mean, I think they looked at the grocery industry, and said the same thing. I don't know if they ever walked away from it like you're describing with Google, but I think that they, had been kind of casing, I'll say, that industry for a little while, and then through Whole Foods, obviously made a big play there. But I think that's right. It'll probably be more through acquisition than it would be through, kind of a homegrown approach. But I don't think they're afraid of a legacy kind of climate. Um, do you?
No, I think Amazon has also executed better as they go into these like totally different industries than Google. Google, has Alphabet, but like I couldn't name another household name. Nest, but didn't they acquire Nest? But basically, Google's like alternative investments have not gone well, and Amazon has had a number that haven't gone well either. But they also have a track record of sticking to it and then succeeding and being willing to lose for a while before they win. So I think to your point, it's more likely that Amazon would and might succeed than Google. Um,
But they're both all in on the IoT.
mhm.
One's just further along. But I think Google's not going to back out of that race, and you could easily connect, the whole housing industry to IoT. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
already taken shape in different ways, but um, this would be more pointed at the process of finding a home
Mhm.
instead of what the experience is once you're in it.
I don't know what percentage right now our advertising represents for Google's market share for advertising dollars, but I'm going to assume it's pretty significant. I don't know what incentive they would have to break that huge paycheck out. Whereas Amazon, I think, entering the market could compete directly with that paycheck. But I don't know why Google would want to steal away from what I assume is a very high revenue generating source for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the argument is like, does Google have the golden handcuffs that they aren't willing to budge on? And now search has been, dominant for like 20 years, right? So that's it. Previously, they haven't taken leaps and bounds there. Whereas Amazon, their fastest growing revenue line is advertising. So
Yeah.
we know that their platforms aren't where Google's are, but it's like it's a. I mean, even though Jeff or Bezos isn't running the helm anymore, he always said, "Your margin is my opportunity," and that's a hell of a margin for Google if they think about the advertising, as you're saying, Sam,
Mm.
related to housing and not just like, oh, can we get in on the 6% margin of a real estate agent or something?
I don't think I don't think they'd sacrifice that much money by doing that.
No.
I don't see Travelocity or whatever like these other companies like not paying Google anymore. I
Mm.
mean, Google, CoStar, I guess throwing out 150 million is not nothing, but in a way it is to Google. And so it's like just because we come into this space doesn't mean that you guys are going to kind of fold up a tent and go home.
Mhm.
You're still going to have to try and run this business, which means you're going to have to keep paying us.
Mhm.
Not to mention we also now are getting in on the revenue.
Right. They'll just have it where it's like, well, now you definitely need to promote yourself above us because,
Yeah, if
we'll
more
show
than
up.
ever. Yeah, we're gonna own that top real estate
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
That's true. That's
Well,
true.
Sam, do you have anything else that we should talk about? I know we usually push people on hot takes. So, hot take would be, do you have a contrarian opinion on something that others don't agree with, or anything of that nature? So, whether you want to go,
I think she has a library of hot takes. It's just a matter of which one you want to choose, Sam.
Uh, yeah, I think I would just, anytime I've got an audience, whether it's like 2 people or 7 people to speak about renter engagement tools, I want to seize the opportunity to do it because it is such an emerging marketplace for us. So I'm talking about ResMate, MeetAlease, BetterBot, Perk, Knox Chatbot, anybody servicing automation to renters. Uh, we've got to separate what the residence experience looks like from the leasing agent experience, from the automation of services, right? So scheduling a tour quickly, getting an FAQ answered fast, verifying pricing and availability, those are all tools that can help improve the renter's experience. But once we start entering into language and engaging with the renters, we've got to be looking at solutions that make it intuitive for renters to know that they are engaged in an experience with a robot. And I know that MeetAlease doesn't agree with me on this, so I guess it's a hot take. But I would just say that if somebody doesn't know that they are engaging with technology that is powered by a robot, they can never ask for help. And that is critical in handing off and that seamless interaction between automation and a renter and in gaining the feedback of how that product is working for you. I would also say that that automation is limited to the same thing our renters are limited to, and that is time. Unless somebody, and I have seen all of the tech and I haven't seen anyone built one who has solved the issue of that really awkward conversation when a really qualified, really engaged renter calls 3-4 months ahead of their move-in date, what that experience looks like. And I'd say a leasing agent is our best bet in servicing that space today because a really good, really strong sales professional builds their wait list, puts that person in the system, sets a follow-up. They do a lot of manual work for that. And I have yet to see any of the automated tech come into this space and be able to do that. In fact, I think they work to the detriment of these really qualified renters. And so if you are exploring that space or you work in that space, you need to put your, what is the, oh, Alice. Is that who does the shopping experiences? You got to put your Ellis hat on and you have got to put these automation tools through that shopping experience and really vet it and say, is this the experience I want to create for renters? And you've got to push back on our competitors when, whether it's a PropTech competitor or a PMC competitor, if they're using the wrong tech, that impacts all of us, right? Because people recognize when they're engaging with the same kind of technology. And if it didn't work on someone else's website, they're going to have the same negative reaction when it comes to your website too. So we just got to pay attention to renter needs in this space and be more critical thinkers.
I think that's great. I think put myself, I guess, in the shoes of an asset manager, fund manager. The question I'd have are what are the trade-offs? Because if I maintain, leasing agent today, et cetera, and I guess try to kind of balance that out, am I losing out, on tomorrow? Like, do I I will grant that our experience isn't going to be as good now, but in order to, keep pace and ultimately like pursue this, future that we're all anticipating, I need to start being more aggressive there and letting go on some level of that experience, which I know I don't want to say totally against, but just pointing out how important it is, and um, if you lose sight of that bigger picture relative to or related to the resident, then you're compromising potentially a lot more. But they don't necessarily see that back to the data. And so from their perspective, it may be like, yeah, that's true now. But again, like the data is telling me that, when the dust settles, this still makes more economic sense for me even now, not to mention like what I need to do to be set up for success in the future. And I'm only speculating, Sam. I just imagine those are the types of things that they're grappling with. And then, who potentially might lose out is the resident in the short term.
I think that's incredibly insightful. I think when you're staring at a financial sheet and you're looking at automating your sales force versus employing a sales force, especially one that's hard to employ, hard to keep retained, you're right. On paper, it makes a lot of sense. But I have represented owners for almost 12 years now, and I cannot tell you how much influence that anecdotal data that is carried by a leasing agent actually impacts investment strategy. And unless somebody in the automated renter experience space is quantifying, qualifying, organizing, and serving back up that operational impactful data, then they're missing out on insights like, how are they responding to our product versus our competitors? How are they responding to this particular renovation style that we're running? Can they run renovation test stylings? There is so much more, and it's so easy for us to condescend to leasing agents in this market. But the anecdotal data and information that a leasing agent shares and carries, and a property manager does about how people are reacting to the product, has a direct impact into how investors run their investment strategy. And I would hate for us to be making decisions off a financial sheet and then walk down the road 2 years ago, oh crap, I can't go into the leasing office and ask anybody how someone's reacting to my product. Now, if somebody builds that intelligently in this space, great. But that connection is so valuable. I tell you, owners and investment strategists are still calling leasing agents and asking what's happening on the ground, what's happening in the market. They do the same thing with brokers. And if we automate that away before considering how valuable that data is, we're going to get ourselves even further away from the renter, which is a problem.
Yeah, totally agree. I think one of the hardest things right now about evaluating, I guess, that experience is how much it changes. It's such a moving target with all the new technology, with, um, just, I guess, a lot of the trends that we're seeing within demographics, within the housing industry, back to all this noise. But, I said this to David, it's like my renter path or experience today, if I went out and rented an apartment, could be different in just a few months. And the feedback that I'd give you, like, today versus what you might hear from me in a few months could be different. And that makes it extremely difficult to find like what are the themes, what are the patterns. And I'm sure that some, I don't want to call it basic, but obviously there would be some stuff that would surface. But down to a single property or a sub market, you see such different dynamics as it relates to the experience of a renter or prospect. And so making sense out of that, for much larger changes, enterprise portfolio changes, is a lot, to think through. And so again, I hate saying it, but is it safer to rely on that financial sheet versus like trying to pin down, what the renter really wants, given again all the change and that moving target? It's like, well, I can trust the financial sheet. Can I really trust, you know, um, this resident feedback coming from the leasing agent? And does it have longevity? Because within a few months, it could be not obsolete, but just not anywhere near as relevant. And now where am I? So I'm only pointing out like how hard this is. I'm not
Yeah, I
saying
know
I,
it's totally hard.
disagree. It's just that is one of the most difficult things. We see that with marketing, where it's like everyone's always talking about the attribution model, MTA. It's like, and I just think it's the Rubik's cube that may never get solved. And I not telling people that we shouldn't keep trying or pursuing, but you know it literally will be a different path for me, like even in 24 hours potentially if I start what my path to rent looks like. and
What? How do
and
you mean?
so
Well, so how do you mean by that? Because I have to push back on you that as large and institutional as property management and investment groups may be, real estate is local. Real estate is brick and mortar, and the strategic decisions that are made on each individual asset impact the financial sheet, which is really just a historical record. It is not a forecast method. And so that anecdotal top market information, which if in this scenario you are the renter is providing to us, is critical in understanding how to run this strategy. Getting macro at local data, that's incredibly valuable to drive versus, one leasing agent. If somebody's figuring that out, that's wonderful. But what do you mean by if I rent today, I'm going to have a different experience than if I rent like 3 weeks from now. How significant is that going to
I
change?
meant, yeah, I meant my path to get there. So if you're looking at like touch attribution and you're like, well, Reed saw an ad on Facebook.
Gotcha.
Then he was served an email. Then he went and searched us. Then he went to an ILS. And then he got served some programmatic. And there was a native article.
Gotcha.
And then I start the next day. It's like that very well could be a different path. And I would also even contend that the resident experience you mentioned, how would that change that much from day to day? I may end up being one of the 50% that did get in touch with somebody right away at the leasing. I mean, on site and had a great phone call. But what if I was the other 50% that didn't? What feedback I'd give you? And what if I was one of the ones that asked the questions that chatbot actually seemed to support really well? Versus somebody that did not. And those are just basic examples, but where the experience and then ultimately the feedback's going to come back differently to asset managers. Like, well, this person said they had an amazing experience with that chatbot. This person hated it. This person was able to get in touch with somebody on site and thought it was wonderful. And this person did a self-guided tour and it was great, but that other person didn't use Tour 24. They used Pinwheel and for whatever, and had a different experience. So I think between technology and between I'll just say those variables that do change, not to mention the marketing, I still think there's a lot to try and normalize.
Reed, I think you missed the perfect opportunity to do a callback to Malcolm or to Malcolm from Jurassic Park when he oh wow, our lights went off. Can you wave your arm over there? We've been on too long and they're shutting us off. No, when he said he's like chaos theory and he's like does the drop down the hand and for Laura Dern and Laura Dern like the drop moves the other way. All right. Anyways, I was just saying it's chaos theory is your whole thing about marketing because you don't know what's going to happen. I think though it's actually more to your point, Sam, about or what I think might be part of your
Does this
point.
mean you're siding with her?
No. I like both. I think it's a blend. I think where I was going to go is it's actually about quality control. We've had so many of our customers ask us, "Can you run a recruiting campaign for me?" Because they can't keep leasing agents or service or like maintenance staff. And because of that, they're getting not the best candidates in the door, and then they're forced to make a hire that they don't want to make it higher. Versus we have clients that have a for sure A player as their leasing staff, and they crush it. And if you have an A player as a leasing staff, you might not need the meet a lease as badly as someone that has all this turnover and they can't get a good leasing agent in the door. So to your point, Reed, like I'll say meet a lease doesn't, as far as I understand, do as much of the guided conversation as like BetterBot. But if you have the right leasing agent on the phone, they might be able to like jump in front of the next question. If someone's like, "Do you have a one bedroom?" Yes, and let me tell you about it. Versus like a meet a lease might be yes, right? But not give the follow up, not help guide them through the sales funnel. And we see the same thing with our clients. When someone comes to us, if we're just like, "Yep, we can run paid search," and we don't like then like give them the next question that they should be asking and help them vet us on their behalf, they're less likely to become a customer of ours than if we have someone that helps vet us for them while they're going. So I'm just saying I think it's a quality control issue, and that's one reason. Like if I, to your point, Reed, like if I didn't have a good hiring system and I owned a bunch of properties, I might say yes, I want all these customer engagement meet a lease platforms or whatever. But then if I'm a customer that has like a sick ass hiring process and I've got good talent coming in the door, maybe I'm less likely to make a quick move on because of the balance sheet.
Right.
If I just want to make sure if you guys don't mind, I just want to clarify my point here. So let me organize it a little bit better because I want to make sure you capture exactly what I'm saying. I'm less concerned about a leasing agent or a renter's interpretation of their interaction with automation, although I think that's incredibly important. What I'm talking about is the nuanced and anecdotal market sensitive information that drives investment decisions that is carried solely today by leasing agents and property managers. And if we automate salespeople away, we have to be incredibly cautious about the data, the market data that we are losing when we lose that staff. The way that we run renovation strategies today, with the way that we test how renters are reacting to quartz versus any other countertop, the flooring, the finish options, blowing out a room in a 2-bedroom, and also understanding the appetite of a 2-bedroom unit 4 months from now. Today, those decisions are made by people, and it's by garnering, engaging the sensitivity of the sales staff to understand what's going on in the market. And these automation tools, with the exception of Perk, who I've seen scratch the surface, are not able to replicate that interpretation of what that top funnel market insights are that drive investment strategy on what to build, how to make it, how it should look, and how to price it, which is incredibly important. And a lot of that comes from anecdotal information. Oh yeah, you know what? We had like 100 people calling about 2 bedrooms and I couldn't help them 4 months ago. We can definitely handle an increase on price there. We don't see that top funnel inquiry of how many people inquired about 2 bedrooms does not hit revenue management systems. What hits revenue management systems is maybe how many people toured, but always how many people applied. And the same thing goes for how we interpret investment strategies around amenities. Like, if I'm way more interested, rather than whether you came from Facebook or not, I want to know how much you care about there being a gym and whether or not I need an elliptical in that gym to cater to you, or if you care way more about closet space and quartz countertop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. Great clarification. I think just briefly connectivity and marketing here, but there's not a whole lot of property management companies, certainly asset managers, that are looking at Google as I don't wanna say the answer for that, but
I know.
you can see exactly what people are
I
searching
know.
for. Are they looking for quartz? Are they looking for granite countertops? There's so much data that's there and is accessible. And then there's also the social listening you can do, and becoming more common. But you know, get you know like direct raw feedback, if you will, from Facebook, from Twitter, from Instagram. See what's on the board. What are people talking about? All that is what you're describing.
Mhm.
That I'm not saying shouldn't and wouldn't help also having, that feedback directly from the leasing agent, but it's like before they even show up on the property, before they even make the phone call, a lot of those insights are there. They're available, but
Well, that's it.
not being used.
That's the perfect close then, right? It's let automation come in and take all the salespeople away, and PMCs and investors and owners who are looking for that data call Digible. They have it, right? That's it.
We do have search volume on like 100 plus keywords that a whole lot of people have never seen and don't know what to do with, but I think
I
it'd be
love
great
it.
for asset managers. Yeah.
Well, I think, Sam, it also sounds like maybe there's just a research problem. It sounds
Yeah.
like there's not like a go-to research company in the space, because this is what Lurch, our chief data officer, used to do for folks. So I didn't realize that there maybe was that much of a gap. I mean, I hear your passion on it, so there must be, but obviously I know like Jay Turner, but I don't.
That's at a macro level, though, I think. I mean, I'm not saying they don't have great stuff, but to Sam's point, that's not like sub-market. Like for that building, what
Right.
what does that look like? What are the things that people are interested in or talking about? And
And
that's the kind of granularity they do not have.
because we started to go a little bit the research phase when we started with Digible, because we were doing simul search and using agreeable to do like the nested opinion stuff. But I'm just saying, like, what I didn't realize, Sam, is that there was that much of a gap, because I would even argue that I hear you that that's important anecdotal stuff, but anecdotal is a key word, and then volume is would be a question for me. Is like, okay, the so you had is 200 people that came in the last month. Is that enough sample size to really like then make a multi-million dollar investment decision on? And so is that the case, that maybe there's like certain firms in certain locations, but there's nobody that can cover this nationwide, where it's like, oh, this is go do a $5,000 research study with them.
You would be floored if you saw how many multi-million dollar investment decisions are made off the recommendations of a handful of leasing agents who talked to a group of people, or property managers or brokers. But we rely so much in the strategic investment decision space on the interpretations of the local market professionals. And so when I say, when we're building tech to automate those people away, that is, I think, one of the more important things that we need to be cautious of, is how much we truly do rely on them for market insights and to do things like test renovations and to give us a sense of what product is, or what the market is reacting to on price. And technology has not been able to satisfy that yet. I hope it does.
And I don't believe that the perks, even who are pretty advanced, but how in a better bot, it's like the B-roll. Like, what do they do with the B-roll of like their text analytics? because what they can report on or bring back is like they asked this question and this was the answer. But what about all those, like, call it long tail or nuanced, like, exchanges? How are they then organizing that and bringing it back to operators, investors, and saying, this is what we learned, from tons of conversations that have happened. um, that's one of the biggest opportunities, because then I would have more faith, to your point, Sam, that it's not the same still as a leasing agent, but it's like you are capturing a lot of the nuance, again, exchanges or questions that are coming from prospects. But today, I don't believe that they're organizing that at all. It is just sitting on a shelf, basically, and not to be unfair, but of like B-roll. It's like we don't know what to do with that, how to organize it, how to serve it back, make it digestible, easy, and actionable. Instead, they're just kind of like, this is what we have. These were,
Yeah.
again, the questions that were asked, what was answered, and that's what we can report on, which in itself does not have a ton of value.
Well, Perk had their BI dashboard that had a lot of this, but it was based on more than just a conversation. And I think it was Trevor when we were talking at BetterBot that said they were just starting, they were providing that back to people now, but they were just starting to figure out what to do with all of it. Because I think you were hitting him on that. But I would say, based on what Sam's describing, this is actually more. You need even more of a full picture, because then you're only getting the subset of people that interact on the website, and then maybe you're asking the leasing agent for the other. But I even think about like our call analytics platform. It's like if every conversation was analyzed to pull out like how many people asked about granite countertops.
Mm.
Because if you're the leasing agent, or if there are 3 leasing agents of that property and 3 people in the same day called about the granite countertops, they may not think that that's what I need to tell uh ownership about, right? So there's probably way more metadata that you could be pulling out of those conversations than what a leasing agent decides to filter out and run up the chain. Sam, every time I talk to you, I feel like it really gets me thinking on things. So this is great. I know we went way long, but it's always a pleasure. I feel like I learned so much.
I feel the same way. I love hanging out with you guys. Hopefully, we can do it in person sometime soon.
It's
Totally.
coming. We just announced this morning. Maybe it was too bold of a prediction. Here in Colorado, they were saying that they thought we'd hit 80% immunity by the end of February, because Omicron's been so, explosive, that either through vaccination, or people just getting it, that we would be at 80% within about 45 days, which would be amazing.
Yeah.
Kind of gross at the same time, but something to look forward to, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll be out to Chicago sometime this year, Sam. So we'll have to connect.
Cool.
All right. Well, Sam, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Sam at GWAdvisement.com, or you can reach me at Skrobot at RentPath.com, depending on what you want to talk about.
Cool. Well, thanks, Sam. We appreciate you
Yeah,
spending time with us.
it was great hanging out with you guys. Have a great rest of your day.